Hold still. The vote is in 14 minutes. Then they will wait. I'm not letting you die on a prosecutor's floor over a proxy count. 6 weeks before that exchange, Tia Sherman stood at the edge of a private dining room on the 47th floor of a hotel she could not afford to sleep in. She held a carafe of sparkling water and watched 11 men in dark suits decide whether she was worth destroying. The bet had circulated before she even tied her apron. George Hayes, head waiter and self-appointed king of the floor staff, had assigned her the VIP table because he wanted to see her fail. Specifically, he wanted her to fail in front of the one guest nobody in Seoul dared disappoint. A 28-year-old syndicate chairman with a semiconductor empire and enough quiet influence to make prosecutors look the other way. Youngjae Jwa did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When he stood up and pulled out his own chair for her, the room went silent. Not respectful silence. The kind that comes right before someone loses their job, or worse. So what happens when the newest server on the floor becomes the only person in that room the most dangerous man decides to protect? Stay with this one, because the chair he hands her is only the beginning. This story does not end the way you think it will. Tia Sherman was 30 years old. She had moved to Seoul 14 months earlier with 2 suitcases and a medical license she could no longer use. Back home in South Georgia, down the road from the tobacco fields her family once sharecropped, she had been a cardiothoracic surgeon. Here she poured water and kept her head down and never mentioned the malpractice lawsuit that had taken everything from her except her hands. Youngjae Jwa noticed those hands before he noticed anything else about her. He noticed the way she held the carafe, the precise angle of her wrist, the steadiness that did not belong to someone who had been waiting tables for less than a year. He had built a $40 billion supply chain by noticing things other people missed. And right now, every server on that floor was waiting for Tia to cry before they cleared the dessert plates. Have you ever watched someone refuse to break? 3 days before she poured water for the most dangerous man in Seoul, Tia Sherman stood in a staff corridor on the hotel's 4th floor and learned exactly how little she was worth. George Hayes held a clipboard. He did not look up from it when he spoke. New girl, 5'7", American, 30 years old. He said the number like it was a problem, like she had already disappointed him by lasting that long without becoming someone else. You understand what private dining service means in this building? Yes, sir. No. He still had not looked at her. You do not. You understand what it means in whatever diner you worked at back home. You do not understand what it means here. Tia kept her hands folded in front of her apron. She had learned a long time ago that the people who wanted to diminish you were usually the ones who needed you to flinch first. She did not give him the flinch. George Hayes was 53 years old, American by birth, Seoul by choice for the last 19 years. He ran the private dining staff at the Hanul Grand like a small kingdom, and he stayed in power the same way small kings always do, by making sure the newest subject understood their place before they had time to question it. He finally looked up. His eyes moved over her the way you might inventory a piece of furniture you had not ordered, checking for flaws, hoping to find them. They told me you have medical training. I have some background, yes. What kind? She paused. 3 seconds, long enough that they both knew she was choosing what to say. I was a cardiothoracic surgeon, 8 years. I left the field 14 months ago. George Hayes smiled. It was not a kind smile. A surgeon. He wrote something on his clipboard. Pouring water. Yes, sir. What happened? A malpractice lawsuit. She said it flatly, the way you say something you have said too many times to feel anymore. I was cleared, but the hospital could not afford the liability. No other hospital would take the risk either. So I came here. To pour water. To start over. George Hayes set down his clipboard. He looked at her for a long moment, and Tia could see him calculating something, weighing her, deciding what she could be used for. The VIP dining room has a private service this Saturday, he said. 11 guests. One of them is Youngjae Jwa. He watched her face when he said the name, waiting for recognition, fear, something. Tia gave him nothing. I do not know who that is, she said. You will. George Hayes picked up his clipboard again. He's 28 years old. He runs a semiconductor and battery conglomerate worth more than most countries. He has connections to people who make problems disappear. And he has never, in 4 years of dining here, had a server last through an entire meal without making at least one mistake. Then I will be careful. You will be more than careful. George stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the starch in his collar.
You will be perfect. And when you are not, because you will not be, you will not make excuses. You will not cry. You will not embarrass this floor or this hotel or me. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. He stepped back, smiled again, that small, cold smile. The rest of the staff has a little tradition for new servers on VIP nights, a pool. They bet on how fast the new one breaks. Last girl made it to the second course before she started crying. The one before that did not even make it through the greeting. Tia said nothing. I'm telling you this, George said, so you understand what you are walking into. Not so you can beat it. You cannot beat it. I am telling you so that when you fail quietly. He walked away before she could respond. Tia stood alone in the corridor for a long time after that. She counted her breaths the way she used to count them before a surgery. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. She had learned, in the years before everything fell apart, that the body knows how to survive things the mind insists are impossible. You just have to let it work. She let it work now. The next morning, Tia arrived at the hotel 40 minutes before her shift. She walked every inch of the 47th floor private dining room. She memorized the placement of every chair, every glass, every piece of silverware. She studied the menu until she could recite it backward. She practiced carrying the water carafe until her wrist stopped aching from the angle. The other servers watched her do this. None of them said anything, but she saw them exchange looks, little smiles, the kind of smiles people share when they know something you do not. On Friday night, one of them finally spoke to her. Her name was Minji. She was 26, pretty, and had worked private dining for 3 years. She found Tia in the supply closet, polishing water glasses that were already clean. You know George is setting you up. Tia kept polishing. I know. The bet is already at 200,000 won. Most people think you will crack during the appetizers. A few think you will make it to the main course. Minji paused. Nobody thinks you will make it to dessert. What do you think? Minji was quiet for a moment. I think you have the steadiest hands I have ever seen on someone who is supposed to be nervous. She leaned against the doorframe. Where did you really work before this? Tia set down the glass she was polishing. She looked at Minji for a long time. I told George the truth. I was a surgeon. And you gave it up to pour water in Seoul? I did not give it up. Tia picked up another glass. It was taken from me. Minji did not ask any more questions after that. But when she left, she paused at the door. For what it is worth, she said, I bet on you making it to dessert. It was not a lot of money, but I wanted someone to believe you could. She was gone before Tia could thank her. Saturday came the way inevitable things always do, too fast and not fast enough. Tia arrived 2 hours early. She checked her uniform 3 times. She practiced her greeting in the mirror until it sounded natural. She reminded herself, over and over, that she had done harder things than this. She had held a human heart in her hands and kept it beating. She could pour water for 11 men in suits. The guests began arriving at 7. They came in 2s and 3s, expensive suits and expensive watches, and the particular confidence that comes from never having been told no. Tia greeted each one. She poured their water.
She answered their questions about the menu. She did everything exactly right. George Hayes watched from the corner of the room. His face gave nothing away. By 7:30, 10 of the 11 guests had arrived. The seat at the head of the table remained empty. At 7:42, the elevator doors opened. Tia was refilling a water glass when she heard the room change. Not the sound of it, the feel. The way every conversation dimmed by half a register. The way every body in every chair shifted slightly toward the door. She turned. Youngjae Jwa was not what she expected. He was 28 years old, but he carried himself like someone who had already lived several lifetimes and found most of them disappointing. He was tall, slender, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than she made in a year. His face was beautiful in the way that expensive architecture is beautiful. Precise, deliberate, designed to make you feel like you were not supposed to be looking. He walked into the room without greeting anyone. His eyes moved over the table, the guests, the walls, the exits, cataloging everything. Then his eyes found Tia. He stopped. It was only for a second, maybe less, but Tia felt it like a hand pressing against her sternum, the weight of being seen by someone who actually knew how to look. He did not smile. He did not nod. He simply looked at her, and then he looked away. And then he took his seat at the head of the table as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Tia could feel it in the way her pulse had shifted. Not faster, not slower, just different. Like her body had recognized something her mind had not caught up to yet. She poured his water without trembling. She did not look at his face again. The first course arrived at 8. Tia served it perfectly, every plate placed from the left, every glass refilled at the right moment, every question answered in the right tone. George Hayes watched. The other servers watched. Everyone was waiting for her to make a mistake. She did not make a mistake. The second course arrived at 8:30. More of the same. Perfect service. Perfect composure. George's face was starting to look pinched around the edges, like a man who had bet on a horse that was refusing to lose. During the third course, one of the guests, a man in his 50s with a gold watch and a voice like he was used to being obeyed, snapped his fingers at Tia. "You, girl." She turned. "Yes, sir?" "My water is warm." It was not warm. She had refilled it less than 2 minutes ago, but she did not argue. "I apologize, sir. Let me get you fresh ice." She turned to go, and the man grabbed her wrist. "I did not dismiss you." The room went quiet. Tia looked down at his hand on her wrist. She looked at his face. She calculated, in the space of a single breath, exactly how much force it would take to break his grip without making a scene. "Sir." Her voice was calm, steady. The voice she used to use in the operating room when something was going wrong and everyone around her was starting to panic. "I need my hand to get your ice." The man smiled, ugly, triumphant. "Maybe I do not want ice anymore." He squeezed tighter. "Maybe I want you to stay right here until I decide what I want." Tia did not flinch. She did not cry. She did not look toward George Hayes for help she knew would not come. She just stood there, her wrist caught in a stranger's grip, and waited. And then a voice from the head of the table said quietly, "Let her go." The room went completely silent. Youngjae Jwa had not raised his voice. He had not stood up. He had not even looked at the man who was holding Tia's wrist. He was still cutting his steak, his movements precise and unhurried, as if nothing unusual was happening at all. "Excuse me?" The man with the gold watch sounded genuinely confused, like he could not quite believe someone had spoken to him that way. "I said let her go." Youngjae still did not look up. "She has work to do. You are preventing her from doing it. That is inconvenient for everyone at this table, including me." The man let go of Tia's wrist. She stepped back. Her heart was pounding now, but her hands were still steady. That was the surgeon in her. The body knew how to work through fear even when the mind was screaming. "Thank you, sir," she said to Youngjae. Her voice did not shake. He looked up at her then. Really looked. Those dark eyes moving over her face like he was reading something written there that no one else could see. "You do not need to thank me." He set down his knife and fork. "You were doing your job. He was doing something else entirely." A pause. "The ice would be appreciated, though." Tia almost smiled. She turned and walked toward the service station, her spine straight, her shoulders back. She could feel every eye in the room on her. She could feel George Hayes' gaze most of all, hot and furious, because she had not broken, and now his bet was looking worse by the minute. She brought fresh ice to Youngjae Jwa's table. She set it down beside his glass with the same precision she had used for every other task that night. "Thank you," he said. "You are welcome, sir." She started to turn away, and he said, very quietly, "Your hands." She stopped. "Sir?" "Your hands." He was looking at them now, at the way she held the ice tongs, at the angle of her wrist. "You have done this before, not serving. Something else, something that required steadiness under pressure." Tia felt her throat tighten. "I have some medical background," she said. The same words she had given George, the same careful nothing. Youngjae Jwa tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Medical background," he repeated. "That is a very careful way to describe whatever it actually was." "Yes, sir, it is." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rest of the room had resumed its conversations, its laughter, its noise. But in this small space between them, there was only silence and the steady weight of his attention. Then Youngjae smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "I hope you make it to dessert," he said. "I would like to see their faces when you do." Tia did not smile back, but something in her chest loosened, just a little. "So would I, sir," she said. She walked away to finish her service. Behind her, Youngjae Jwa picked up his water glass and watched her go. His eyes never left her until she disappeared through the service door. George Hayes saw this. George Hayes saw everything. And for the first time all night, George Hayes looked afraid. The dessert course arrived at 9:17. Tia carried the first plate herself. Chocolate soufflé, gold leaf, a single raspberry placed at the 11 o'clock position exactly as the chef had specified. She set it in front of the man with the gold watch, the one who had grabbed her wrist, and she did not look at his face when she did it. He did not touch her this time. He did not even speak. But she could feel his anger radiating off him like heat from an open stove. George Hayes stood near the service door, his clipboard clutched against his chest. His face had gone the color of old cheese. The other servers kept glancing at him, then at Tia, then at each other. The bet was supposed to be over by now. She was supposed to have broken. She had not broken. When Tia set the final dessert plate in front of Youngjae Jwa, he looked up at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You won," he said quietly. "Sir?" "The bet." He picked up his dessert fork. "Whatever they wagered on you failing, you won." Tia felt her face go still. She had not realized he knew about the bet. She had not realized anyone outside the staff knew about it. "I do not know what you mean, sir." Youngjae smiled again. That same small, barely there smile from before. "You know exactly what I mean." He took a bite of his soufflé. "And you are too smart to admit it in front of witnesses. I respect that." He did not say anything else, but when Tia walked away, she felt his eyes on her back, and the weight of his attention was different now. Heavier. More deliberate. Like he had decided something about her, and she was not going to like what came next. The guests left at 10:43. They filed out in twos and threes, the same way they had arrived, leaving behind empty plates and lipstick-stained glasses and the particular silence that follows an event where something unexpected happened. Youngjae Jwa was the last to leave. He stood at the door for a moment, his coat draped over his arm, his eyes moving across the room one final time.
Cataloging, recording, filing away details for later use. His gaze stopped on Tia. She was clearing the head of the table, stacking plates with the same mechanical precision she had used all night. She did not look up when she felt him watching. She did not acknowledge him at all. But her hand slowed, just slightly, just enough that someone paying very close attention might notice. Youngjae noticed. He turned and left without saying goodbye. George Hayes waited until the elevator doors closed. Then he crossed the room in 6 long strides and stopped directly in front of Tia. "My office," he said. "Now." Tia set down the plates she was holding. She followed him through the service door, down the corridor, into a small room with no windows and a desk covered in schedules and complaint forms. George closed the door behind them. For a long moment, he did not speak. He just stood there, his back against the door, his arms crossed over his chest, looking at her the way you might look at a stain you cannot figure out how to remove. You think you won something tonight. No, sir. You think because Jwa spoke up for you, because he looked at you like you were worth looking at, that you have some kind of protection now. No, sir. You are wrong. George's voice was flat, dangerous. The voice of a man who had been humiliated and was deciding how to make someone pay for it. Youngjae Jwa does not protect people. He uses them. And when he is done using them, he throws them away. Tia said nothing. "I have worked in this industry for 31 years. George uncrossed his arms, stepped closer. "I have seen men like him ruin people without even noticing they did it. You are nothing to him. You are a curiosity, a novelty, something interesting to look at for one evening. By next week, he will not remember your name. Yes, sir. Stop saying yes, sir, like you agree with me when we both know you do not." Tia looked at him then, really looked. The way she used to look at patients who were lying about their symptoms because they were too afraid to hear the truth. "What would you like me to say, Mr. Hayes?" George's jaw tightened. "I would like you to understand something." He was very close now, close enough that she could see the broken capillaries in his nose, the yellow tinge at the corners of his eyes. "Tomorrow morning, I'm filing a report with the hotel's HR department. I am going to tell them that you were unprofessional with a guest tonight, that you made inappropriate eye contact with Mr. Jwa, that your behavior was suggestive and unbecoming of a member of this staff." Tia felt something cold settle in her chest. "That is not what happened." "It does not matter what happened," George smiled, that same cold smile from before. "It matters what I say happened. And I say you threw yourself at the most important guest in that room like a cheap hostess looking for a wealthy husband. That is a lie. Prove it." Tia was silent, because she could not prove it, because there were no cameras in the private dining room, no recordings, no witnesses who would speak against George Hayes and risk their own jobs. Because this was exactly the kind of trap she had walked into before, back home, when a patient's family had decided they needed someone to blame for their grief and she had been the easiest target. "You have 24 hours, George said. "By this time tomorrow night, either you resign quietly and I file no report, or you stay and I destroy whatever is left of your career." He opened the door. "Choose carefully." He walked out. Tia stood alone in his office for a long time. She counted her breaths. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. It did not help this time. She left the hotel at 11:30. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that Seoul only gets in the hours between the last train and the first light. She walked instead of taking a taxi. She needed the movement, the cold air, the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other until her mind stopped spinning. She thought about the malpractice lawsuit, the way it had started as a whisper and grown into a roar, the depositions,
The depositions, the endless depositions, where lawyers asked her the same questions 40 different ways until she could not remember what the truth even sounded like anymore. She had been cleared. That was supposed to mean something. But the hospital had let her go anyway, and no other hospital would hire her. And the career she had spent 8 years building had collapsed in less than 6 months.
Now it was happening again. Different city, different language, same outcome. She stopped walking. She was standing on a bridge over the Han River, the water dark and flat beneath her, the city lights reflecting off its surface like scattered coins. She thought about how easy it would be to give up, to resign, to pack her 2 suitcases and fly back to Georgia and spend the rest of her life explaining to people why she was not a surgeon anymore, and why she was not a server anymore, and why she kept failing at everything she tried. But then she thought about the way Youngjae Jwa had looked at her hands, the way he had noticed something no one else had noticed in 14 months, the way he had said, very quietly, that he hoped she would make it to dessert. He had seen her, not the fallen surgeon, not the desperate server, not the easy target. Her, Tia Sherman, 30 years old, from South Georgia, granddaughter of sharecroppers, survivor of things that should have killed her and did not. She turned away from the railing and started walking again. She was not going to resign. The next morning, she went to the hotel's HR department and requested a meeting. The woman behind the desk looked at her with the particular wariness that HR professionals develop when they sense trouble coming. "What is this regarding?" "I would like to file a formal complaint," Tia said, "against George Hayes, head waiter for private dining services." The woman's expression did not change, but her pen stopped moving. "A complaint?" "Yes, ma'am. For harassment, fabrication of disciplinary reports, and creating a hostile work environment. Those are serious allegations." "Yes, ma'am, they are." The woman studied her for a long moment, weighing, calculating, making the same kind of calculations George had made when he first looked at Tia in that corridor. "You understand," she said finally, "that Mr. Hayes has been employed by this hotel for 19 years. He has an excellent record. He is well regarded by management and by the guests he serves." "I understand." "And you understand that you have been employed here for less than 1 year, that you have no witnesses willing to corroborate your version of events, that if this complaint proceeds and is found to be unsubstantiated, you will almost certainly lose your position." Tia did not flinch. "I understand," she said. "I'm filing the complaint anyway." The woman looked at her for another long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Something that might have been respect, or might have been pity, or might have been both. "Very well." She pulled out a form. "Please describe the incident in detail." Tia described it. Every word George had said. Every threat he had made. The bet he had organized among the staff. The way he had assigned her to the VIP table specifically because he wanted to watch her fail. When she finished, the woman set down her pen. "This will take time to investigate," she said. "In the meantime, you are suspended with pay pending the outcome." Suspended. It is standard procedure in cases involving senior staff. The woman's voice was careful, neutral. "Mr. Hayes has requested that you not be permitted on the premises during the investigation. Given the nature of the allegations on both sides, management has agreed." Tia felt the cold settle deeper. "So he wins." "Nobody has won yet, Miss Sherman." The woman stood. "The investigation will be conducted fairly. Both sides will have an opportunity to present evidence. A decision will be reached within 14 days. 14 days. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks of not working. 2 weeks of watching her savings drain away while George Hayes continued to walk through that hotel like he owned it. Tia stood. She shook the woman's hand.
She walked out of the HR office and through the lobby and into the bright, cold Seoul morning. She did not cry. She had stopped crying a long time ago. 3 days later, she received a letter. It came to her apartment, a converted attic space above a dry cleaner in Mapogu that smelled perpetually of cleaning chemicals and someone else's laundry. The envelope was heavy cream paper, the kind that costs more per sheet than she spent on groceries in a week. Inside was a single card, handwritten, black ink on white paper, the address of a restaurant in Gangnam, a time, a date. And at the bottom, in the same careful handwriting, I would like to discuss an opportunity. Please come alone, YJ. Tia read the card 3 times. She turned it over, looking for more information, some explanation, anything. There was nothing else. She thought about not going. She thought about all the ways this could be a trap, a setup, another George Hayes waiting to destroy what little she had left. But then she thought about the way Youngjae Jwa had looked at her hands, the way he had noticed. She went. The restaurant was on the 14th floor of a building in Gangnam that looked like it had been designed by someone who found right angles personally offensive. Every surface curved. Every wall met the ceiling at an angle that made her feel slightly off balance. Youngjae was already seated when she arrived. Alone at a table for 2 by the window, the city spread out beneath him like something he was considering whether to purchase. He stood when he saw her.
It was a small gesture. Automatic, maybe. The kind of thing wealthy men were trained to do. But something about the way he did it felt different. More deliberate. Like he was not just being polite, but making a choice. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I almost did not. I know." He waited until she sat before taking his own seat again. "I heard about the investigation." Tia felt her spine stiffen. "How?" "I make it my business to know things."
He signaled to a waiter, ordered tea for both of them without asking what she wanted. George Hayes has been filing complaints against servers for years, mostly women, mostly new employees, mostly people who do not have the resources to fight back. You knew about this, and you still dined there. I dined there because the food is excellent and the view is convenient. He met her eyes directly. I did not interfere because it was not my business, until now. What changed? Youngjae was quiet for a moment. The tea arrived. He poured hers first, another small, deliberate gesture, and watched her take the cup before he touched his own. I noticed something about you, he said finally. The night of the dinner, your hands. You mentioned that. I did not mention what I noticed. He set down his teacup. You have surgeon's hands, the way you hold things, the angle of your wrist, the steadiness under pressure. I have employed enough doctors to recognize the signs. Tia said nothing. I also noticed, he continued, that when Mr. Park grabbed your wrist, you calculated exactly how much force it would take to break his grip without making a scene. You did not do it, but you calculated it in less than a second. She still said nothing. That is not something a waitress learns. Youngjae leaned back in his chair. That is something a surgeon learns. Someone who has to make decisions about human bodies under pressure, quickly, accurately, with consequences if they are wrong. What do you want from me, Mr. Jwa? I want to offer you a job. Tia blinked. A job? My company has a medical team, 12 physicians, various specialists, responsible for the health of our executives and their families. We also have a number of projects that require medical expertise in non-clinical settings. He paused. I need someone with surgical skills who can work under pressure, who can be trusted with sensitive information, and who is not afraid of people who think they are more powerful than they are. I cannot practice medicine anymore. I'm not asking you to practice medicine. He picked up his tea again. I'm asking you to use your medical knowledge in other ways, advisory roles. Risk assessment, emergency response planning, things that do not require a license but do require someone who knows what they are doing. Tia felt something shift in her chest, something that might have been hope, which she had learned a long time ago to distrust. Why me? Because you did not break. Youngjae's voice was quiet, matter of fact, like he was stating something obvious. Because when a man twice your size grabbed you in a room full of people who wanted to see you fail, you stood there and calculated and waited for the right moment. You did not panic. You did not cry. You did not beg for help. He set down his cup. I need people like that. People who can stay calm when everything around them is designed to make them fall apart. Tia looked at him for a long moment. At his face, which was beautiful and closed and gave away almost nothing. At his hands, which were steady on the table, no rings, no watch, nothing to distract from the precision of his movements. What about the investigation? She said. If I take this job, George Hayes will say I was trying to sleep my way into your company. He will use it against me. He will try. Youngjae's eyes did not leave hers. And he will fail. Because in 2 weeks, when the investigation concludes, the hotel will have received testimony from 3 former employees who are willing to describe their own experiences with Mr. Hayes. Testimony I helped them find the courage to give. Tia felt her breath catch. You did that. I told you. I make it my business to know things. He stood. The job is yours, if you want it. You have until the end of the week to decide. My assistant will provide the details. He pulled a card from his pocket and set it on the table beside her untouched tea. One more thing, he said. My company is facing a shareholder vote in 6 weeks. There are people who want me removed from my position as chairman. People who think a 28-year-old has no business running a $40 billion supply chain. He paused. The outcome of that vote will determine whether I can keep the promises I am making to you tonight. I thought you should know that before you decide. He left her sitting there with the card and the tea and the city spread out beneath her like a map of everything she did not yet understand. Tia picked up the card. Heavy cream paper, black ink, an address in Seongbuk-dong. She turned it over. On the back, in the same careful handwriting, I hope you decide to stay. She did not know yet what she was going to do, but for the first time in 14 months, she felt like she had a choice. 6 weeks passed, the way difficult things always do, slowly when she was waiting, impossibly fast when she looked back. Tia learned the rhythms of Youngjae's company the way she had once learned the rhythms of a hospital. The morning briefings at 7, the silent tension in the executive suites whenever news broke about the shareholder vote. The way people watched her when she walked through the halls, trying to figure out what she was to the chairman and whether that made her dangerous or useful. She was neither. She was just someone doing a job. Advisory roles. Risk assessment. Emergency response planning. Things that did not require a license but did require someone who knew what they were doing. The HR investigation concluded in 12 days, not 14. George Hayes was terminated for cause. 3 former employees testified. The hotel released a statement expressing regret and commitment to workplace safety. George's name was not mentioned anywhere public, but everyone who mattered knew. Tia did not celebrate. She filed the information away with the other things she had survived and kept working. The shareholder vote was scheduled for a Tuesday in early spring. 14% of voting shares were contested. The opposition had been building their case for months. Youngjae was too young, too reckless, too dependent on a supply chain that could collapse if the political winds shifted. They wanted him replaced with someone older, someone more predictable, someone who would not bet the company's future on technologies that did not exist yet. Youngjae spent the week before the vote in meetings that lasted until midnight. Tia saw him in passing, always moving, always surrounded by lawyers and advisors, speaking in low, urgent voices. He looked tired in a way that made her chest tighten. She did not say anything about it. It was not her place. On the morning of the vote, she arrived at the prosecutor's office in Seongbuk-dong at 8:47. The building was 9 floors of gray concrete and tinted glass, the kind of government architecture designed to make everyone who entered feel slightly smaller than they were. The shareholder meeting was happening on the 9th floor. A procedural requirement, something to do with contested proxies and legal oversight. Tia did not understand all the details. She understood that Youngjae needed 51% of voting shares to keep his position, and as of that morning, he had 49.6. She understood that the next 3 hours would determine whether the job he had given her still existed by sunset. At 9:12, Youngjae arrived. He came through the lobby with 4 security personnel and 2 lawyers, all of them moving at the particular pace of people who are trying not to look like they are rushing. He saw Tia standing near the elevator bank and slowed, just slightly. "You came," he said. "You asked me to. I asked you to be available in case of emergency." His eyes moved over her face, reading, cataloging. "This is not an emergency. This is a vote. I wanted to be here." Something shifted in his expression. Something that might have been gratitude, or might have been something else entirely. "9th floor," he said. "The meeting starts at 10. Stay close." He stepped into the elevator. Tia followed. The 9th floor was chaos organized into the shape of a conference room. 43 shareholders, or their legal proxies, seated in rows that faced a raised platform at the front. Television cameras along the back wall broadcasting the proceedings to investors who could not attend in person. Security at every door. Tia found a seat near the side exit. She watched Youngjae take his position at the front of the room, flanked by his legal team, his face composed and unreadable. The opposition spoke first. Their representative was a man in his 60s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of voice that filled a room without effort. He laid out the case against Youngjae's leadership in precise, measured sentences. The supply chain risks, the political exposure, the question of whether a company worth $40 billion should be trusted to someone who had not yet turned 30. Youngjae listened without expression. At 10:17, the fire alarm went off. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched shriek that made everyone in the room freeze for a single confused moment. Then people started moving, grabbing briefcases and phones, heading for the exits in the particular half-panic of professionals who did not want to look afraid. Tia stayed where she was. She watched Youngjae's security team close ranks around him. She watched the opposition representative look toward the cameras with something that might have been satisfaction. She watched the room empty, and she counted the seconds, and she felt the weight of something wrong settle into her chest. At 10:18, she heard the gunshot. It came from the stairwell, a single sharp crack that cut through the alarm's shriek like a knife through fabric. Then shouting. Then silence. Tia was moving before she finished processing what she had heard. She found Youngjae in the stairwell between the 9th and 8th floors. He was sitting against the wall, his hand pressed to his side, his face the color of old paper. 2 of his security personnel were down. The 3rd was on his radio, calling for medical, his voice steady in the way that training makes you steady when everything else is falling apart. Tia knelt beside Youngjae. "Let me see." He moved his hand. The wound was below his ribs on the left side, bleeding steadily, not arterially, but enough to be serious. She could see the entry point, but not the exit. The bullet was still inside. "I need a knife," she said. "Clean, sharp, and something to hold the wound open." The security officer stared at her. "Now." He moved. Tia turned back to Youngjae. His eyes were open, focused on her face, that same steady gaze he had given her the night of the dinner. "The vote," he said, "is in 14 minutes. Then they will wait. I'm not letting you die on a prosecutor's floor over a proxy count." She pulled off her jacket and pressed it against the wound. She could feel his heartbeat through the fabric, steady but too fast. "Hold still. The vote is in 14 minutes. Then they will wait. I'm not letting you die on a prosecutor's floor over a proxy count. The security officer returned with a kitchen knife from the floor's break room and a pair of metal chopsticks someone had left in a desk drawer. Not ideal. Not even close to ideal. But better than nothing. Tia worked. She worked the way she had worked in the operating room, the way her hands remembered even when her mind tried to forget. She found the bullet lodged against a rib, not deep enough to cause catastrophic damage, but deep enough to kill him if it was not removed. She extracted it with the chopsticks, cleaned the wound with bottled water from someone's briefcase, and closed the tissue with strips torn from her blouse and tied tight. It took 11 minutes. When she finished, Youngjae's color was better. His breathing was steadier. His eyes had never left her face. "You are a surgeon," he said quietly. "I was a surgeon." She sat back on her heels. "Now I am someone who works for you." "You saved my life. You gave me a job when no one else would. We are even." She helped him stand. He leaned against the wall, testing his weight, wincing when the movement pulled at the wound she had closed. "I have to go back," he said. "The vote." "You were just shot." "I know." He straightened his spine, smoothed his jacket, which was ruined, which would never be clean again. "But if I do not walk back into that room, they win, and I do not intend to let them win." He walked back into the conference room at 10:31. Tia followed. The shareholders had been herded back to their seats. The cameras were still rolling. The opposition representative was standing at the front of the room, clearly in the middle of a speech about the chaos being evidence of Youngjae's inability to maintain order. He stopped talking when Youngjae walked in. Everyone stopped talking. Youngjae took his position at the front of the room. He was pale. He was bleeding through his jacket. He was the most composed person Tia had ever seen. "I apologize for the interruption," he said. "Someone tried to kill me in the stairwell. They failed. Shall we proceed with the vote?" The room was completely silent. Youngjae turned to face the shareholders directly. "Before we vote, I would like to address the claims made against my leadership." His voice was steady, quiet, the voice of someone who did not need to raise it to be heard. "Mr. Chen has argued that I am too young to lead this company, that I take too many risks, that I cannot be trusted with the future of $40 billion in shareholder value." He paused. "I would like to respond with a question. How many of you knew that Mr. Chen's primary investor has been shorting our stock for the past 6 months? How many of you knew that the man who just shot me was employed by a security firm that Mr. Chen has used for the past 3 years? The silence changed, became heavier. "I do not make accusations lightly." Youngjae's eyes moved across the room. "But I also do not allow people who have tried to kill me to remove me from my own company through procedural manipulation." Mr. Chen's face had gone the color of spoiled cream. Tia watched Youngjae. She watched the way he held the room without raising his voice, the way he presented evidence the way she had once presented surgical findings. Precise, factual, devastating. And then she watched him turn to the side exit where George Hayes was standing. She had not seen him come in. She had not known he was there. But now she could see him clearly, his face twisted with something that might have been fear or might have been hatred. Youngjae saw him too. "Mr. Hayes," Youngjae said quietly, "I am told you have information about the opposition's campaign. Information you offered to sell to the highest bidder." George's face went white. "I'm also told," Youngjae continued, "that you spent 19 years systematically harassing women in your employ, that you bet on their failure, that you destroyed careers for sport." The room was completely still. Youngjae looked at Tia. "Miss Sherman," he said, "this man tried to end your career. I could have him arrested right now. I could destroy him the way he tried to destroy you. I could make sure he never works again." Tia stood. Every eye in the room turned to her. She looked at George Hayes. At his face, which was pale and frightened and so much smaller than it had seemed in that corridor 6 weeks ago. At his hands, which were shaking. She thought about everything he had done. The bet, the threats, the way he had looked at her like she was worth nothing. And then she thought about the woman she wanted to be. "I do not want him destroyed," she said quietly. "I want him held accountable. Through the proper legal process. The way it should have happened 19 years ago, the first time he did this to someone." Youngjae's expression did not change, but something in his eyes softened. "The proper legal process," he repeated. "Yes," he nodded once. "Then that is what will happen." He turned back to the shareholders. "Shall we vote?" The vote passed at 11:14. 53.2% in favor of Youngjae's continued leadership. By noon, 3 arrests had been made. By evening, Mr. Chen's primary investor had withdrawn from the market entirely. By the following Tuesday, Tia Sherman had an office on the 14th floor of Youngjae's headquarters, with a window that overlooked the city she had come to 14 months earlier with nothing but 2 suitcases and a name no hospital would hire. Youngjae found her there at sunset, standing by the glass, watching the light change. "You are supposed to be in a hospital bed," she said without turning around. "I discharged myself. That is medically inadvisable. So I have been told." He crossed the room and stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, not touching, not yet. "By several very concerned physicians who do not know that the woman who saved my life works 3 floors above them." Tia turned to look at him, at the careful way he held his left side, at the color that had returned to his face, at the steadiness in his eyes that had not wavered once, not when he was bleeding on a prosecutor's floor, not when he walked back into that room to face the people who had tried to kill him. "How does it feel," she said quietly, "to still be the chairman?" "The same as it felt before." He paused. "Except now I have someone worth building something for." The words hung in the air between them. Tia did not look away. "You barely know me." "I know your hands." His voice was quiet, certain. "I know you do not break. I know you chose justice over revenge when revenge would have been easier and no one would have blamed you for it." He reached out, slowly, and took her hand in his. "I know enough." She looked at their hands, at the way his fingers closed around hers, careful, deliberate, the same precision he brought to everything. "This is not how these things usually go," she said. "No." He smiled then. That smile she had seen maybe twice before, barely there, gone almost as soon as it appeared. But this time it stayed. This time it was for her. "It is better." She had learned that dignity is not the absence of anger. She had learned that the right choice is rarely the easy one. She had learned that the people who see you clearly are worth more than the ones who see what they expect. She had learned that sometimes, if you refuse to break, the world rearranges itself around your refusal. Tia Sherman, 30 years old, from South Georgia, squeezed his hand once and did not let go. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me the moment you knew Tia was going to be okay. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, and I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. Thank you for watching until the very end. I will see you in the next one.